Thursday. Happy 4th of July. Welcome to Real Talk for Real Men. We're on Awesome Radio, 107.5 FM, WECU 1570 AM. And God bless you. Thank you for tuning in. We pray that the Lord will bless us to say something or discuss something that will edify and inspire you today as you navigate your life through this world that we're in. We want to be able to impart some wisdom and something to help you with your strategy for having a great life. I'm Dan Lawson. I'm the church located in Kinston, North Carolina. And also in our discussion panel is
Elder Nat Farrow from Kingdom of Heaven Ministries here in Greenville, North Carolina.
okay. Good to see you, Elder, and happy 4th. Now, you are already familiar with what we're supposed to talk about today. So, why don't you get us started?
Well, it's the 4th of July, where the nation celebrates its founding. From England and the King of England, seemed like the Supreme Court didn't quite get the news because they seemed like they wanted to bring a king back, but that's another story. Actually, it's not another story, but we won't go there right now. So that's what this is, and from what I understand is from the leader, I say leader, but from Pastor Forbes, he was mentioning that you wanted to talk about whether, as Black people, should we celebrate? And my answer to that actually is yes, but we have the caveats. You know what I'm saying? And we got to take it back to now that we've come forward and we're not in the time of when Frederick Douglass was invited to speak in his hometown up in New York, in Rochester, and he posed the question of what to the slave is the 4th of July. So we're not in that time, and I think a lot of things have transpired. We haven't totally got to the perfect union, but I think we're working on it, and we got some things that we're going to have to do this year to make sure that we get there. Otherwise, we're going to slide back. So that's my introduction.
Well, and you've already made your choice that yes, we should celebrate the 4th of July because times have changed. Let me give some more information. You talked about Frederick Douglass, who in I think it was 1852 he made that speech in Rochester, New York, and he brought forth some. He noted some things. He acknowledged one of the things he did in that speech is he acknowledged that the founding fathers were great men. That's how he referred to them, great men for their ideals of freedom. And I think everybody pretty much agrees with that. But in doing so, he said he had to make awareness of the hypocrisy of their ideals by the existence of slavery on American soil. So I think that's significant. I think that's something that should not be swept under the rug. One of the things that Frederick Douglass said in that speech, he said, "You may rejoice, but I must mourn." That's what he said.
Right.
But some other facts. of the 56 men who signed the Declaration of Independence, 41 of them owned slaves.
How many?
Thomas, 41 of those.
Oh,
signers,
41. Yeah, okay.
41 of those signers owned slaves. Thomas Jefferson, the person that we give credit for being the author of the Declaration of Independence, and technically you could argue that, but that's what a lot of people do. They give him credit for being the author. At age 33, he became, he was a primary author of the Declaration of Independence, who would become he later became the third president of the United States. He owned more than 600 slaves during his lifetime, and he bought and sold slaves. He also fathered 2 children with one of his slaves. Black people were not considered to be a full human being during that time while they were here in America as slaves. So as the signers wrote life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness into the document, our forefathers and foremothers were slaves and did not have any rights to that freedom. They had no rights at all to that freedom. One more thing.
Let me inject right there. Also, women didn't.
You're right. White women.
Women didn't. Women at all didn't.
Wait a minute. Let's make sure we clarify that. Black women, black people had no rights to any of that freedom. White women did have rights to some of that freedom, but they also were denied certain rights, like voting. Okay. You see what I'm saying? But they were still free.
Right.
They had rights in court. They could go to court. They had rights to defend themselves.
They were limited. They were limited rights.
They had limited rights, but they still had rights. The basic rights they had.
Right.
Okay. Other than voting, I think voting is a big deal. That they did not have that right. But black people had no rights at all. Black people were more comparable to livestock than they were to human beings. And I think you can argue that socially or economically, and you'll come with the same conclusion. But one last thing, when the national anthem was written by 34-year-old Francis Scott Key. Francis Scott Key was quoted as saying that the slaves were an inferior race. Inferior. They were inferior race. He wrote the national anthem, and he would only support freeing them if they were immediately shipped back to Africa. He was not going to accept them as co-citizens. Another fact, before the Declaration of Independence was finalized, there was a line in there that acknowledged that slavery was not a good thing. There was some condemnation of slavery in the original writing of the Declaration of Independence, but it was wiped out. There was not going to sign it with that line in there, so they wiped it out, which is, to me, is significant because it kind of go along with the attitude today of some people who want to sweep all of this history of slavery under a rug. Let's not talk about it. Let's not teach it. Let's get it out of the history books. And they wiped it out of the Declaration of Independence. There was also some derogatory language in the original writing of the national anthem that was erased. Derogatory about slavery, something about, their plight was the grave. Like that was their only hope.
That was that third verse.
Yeah, and they got rid of that.
Well, they don't use it. I don't know if they got rid of it, but they don't use that. We just do the first verse now.
The national anthem, nobody sings the national anthem with that particular verse in it.
I don't know the
Right,
problem.
right. We only do the first verse. Right.
They might sing it in the privacy of their homes, but if they sing that, that statement was very bad. And if it was sang out in public anywhere,
Well, he was a slave owner and an anti-abolitionist. And I know you said that. You kind of said that, but that's who he was. But so were a lot of white men at that time. I think what has happened since then is that we have fought for this idea of citizenship. We have been fighting that idea from the beginning. It just wasn't happening when they wrote the Declaration. The slave trade was still in effect.
Oh yeah.
So yeah. It took. I think the United States was one of the last ones to abolish it. But yet, even when they did that, they still had slaves. So until the Civil War.
Even when the Emancipation Proclamation.
No, before that, slavery was abolished. But
I'm making another point.
right.
During the Emancipation Proclamation was done in 1865, and slaves were freed.
No, that's not what I was saying. And I think the Emancipation Proclamation.
Go ahead and finish your point.
Yeah, the Emancipation Proclamation was, I think, 1863. But the point was that slavery, the slave trade in America was abolished earlier than that, and I'll pull that up in a minute exactly when it was. But it was before then. But yet, slavery itself was not abolished. Right. And then the Emancipation Proclamation was really like a what you call it? It was a signing order from the president. It was a what we call it now. It's when the president did it, and it was good, but it wasn't law. It wasn't until the 13th Amendment they actually put it in the Constitution.
Okay, I'm gonna make my point now, which is different.
Okay,
this is a whole.
I'm through.
My point was that once the slaves were freed in America, Jim Crow was installed to still make sure that black people weren't free. That was the purpose of Jim Crow, to make sure that black people were not free and that they would never be equal to white people. That was installed, and it was installed with force. Very prevalent in the South.
Okay,
so that's the one thing. When you talk about whether we should celebrate the 4th of July, my response would be, I'll celebrate it with a qualified opinion about it. And I'm very thankful that Juneteenth is a celebration that we have that's very close to the 4th of July, because let's face it, Juneteenth is more about independence for the black man than the 4th of July or the Declaration of Independence in 1776.
Okay, I want to make just one note. Everything you said is good. I want to make one note though. In between Jim Crow and the end of the Civil War was Reconstruction. So there was about 20 years that we were kind of making strides in this thing. And then they had that compromise of 1877, and that stopped everything. And that's when Jim Crow really took off, because they didn't deal with the Confederacy. Huh?
There's something to that. When the war was won by the North, there were soldiers placed in the South.
Right.
Soldiers were there. Reconstruction was able to flourish. But as
Right.
soon as those soldiers left, that's when Jim Crow came down with a force. And I think they had been planning it all along. I think history confirms that this people in the South had been planning that all along. As soon as these soldiers leave, I also read that there was some compromise in the Congress between the Southern folks and the Congress to get those soldiers out of there so that they could do this Jim Crow thing. And they were senators and representatives that accommodated that. It's
Right, but it was a contested presidential election. It was a contested presidential election, and the compromise to kind of get through that, I think, was taking the troops out. I agree with you. I'm not disagreeing with you.
Even Lincoln made some compromises after the Civil War. Even before the Civil War, he made some compromises, but he made some after the war too. But again, that does not do away with the fact that a lot of progress has been made, through civil rights and that kind of thing. So, but I just hate to see history swept under the rug because it takes away from people who fought so hard to get what we got.
Go ahead, Pastor Forbes. Jump in there.
Y'all playing tennis.
No, we doing. I think we pretty much agree. I don't think we disagreed on anything.
I ain't say what side. Y'all playing double tennis then. Y'all both on the same side, covering the spread.
So are you going to celebrate, what would you like?
You know it, and your face is surely show it. Now and I know that might be, but I'm kind of a little bit further removed from some of the things that y'all kind of went through and experienced. So, let me say it this way. I thank President Biden for helping establish Juneteenth. That's one thing. That's one thing I want to do. The other thing is, even though, and it's sad, after all these years, I celebrate our freedom as an American citizen. Let me back up. And this is real funny to me. Do you know if I put on a red, white, and blue shirt or red, white, and blue hat, people automatically think one way or the other that I'm on one way, I'm kind of thinking political. I probably have at least 3 or 4 of them. I haven't worn in a while, especially during this political season, but generally the last few years I have them on, and that black people will look at me and think it's going one way, and I'm like, no, that ain't quite where I'm going. I'm glad I'm an American citizen. Then there's times I might wear my red, white, and blue shirt, and I have white people come, I have them come up to me in the grocery store and want to talk about they can't wait, either for Trump to come back, Biden, just and have those real nationalistic conversations. Or if I wear it and I go to the beach, man, I get some good favor. I mean, people treat me real good. And like I'm just like, you get what I'm saying. So, and this
So
putting it on, how people view you with that shirt on, and you haven't opened your mouth. It's just a shirt, and most of the time, it's my wife that bought the shirts.
So you get a.
See, yeah. Now you did the Alito thing.
Yeah,
You're doing the wife. I'm just kidding.
We have fun. Listen, when she bought them, sometimes Crystal bought her she got a nice, like, American flag dress, and then I wear the shirt. And so I could say that when I go on vacation, some odd reason I'm treated real well, and I appreciate it. But it's just amazing how certain symbols that we have in our mind and what they mean. But on that note, we're coming to our first sponsorship break, and we will return to this station, 107.5, after the break. We'll see you. Real Talk for Real Men.
You're listening to Awesome Radio, WECU 107.5 FM, 1570 AM. Christian media with the spirit of excellence.
Here's a minute to inspire fresh hope in your busy day.
Joseph and Samson were indeed both divinely chosen deliverers of Israel, but at the same time, moral opposites. Joseph is faithful in his service and practices self-control. Samson follows his passions with no self-control. Joseph delivered Israel as an extraordinary man of integrity during his life. Samson delivered Israel as an imprisoned blind man by his death. What a stark contrast represented in Proverbs 11. The righteousness of the upright delivers them, but the unfaithful are trapped by evil desires. So what will you choose? Being enslaved by sexual immorality or being free through sexual integrity? The choice is yours.
This Hope Minute was brought to you by Hope for the Heart. To learn more, go to hopeminute.org.
You're listening to Awesome Radio, WECU 107.5 FM, 1570 AM. Christian media with the spirit of excellence.
Surely in the family, God is with me. Surely in the family, God is with me. Surely in the family, God is with me.
Well, you're listening to Awesome Radio, 107.5 FM, WECU. Real Talk for Real Men. I tell you what now, even though we don't talk about it much, I enjoy those hope minutes. Now, I don't, that we have in between. They're very encouraging.
Yes, they are.
They're very encouraging. But anyway, let's go back to what we're talking about. I'm going to celebrate the 4th of July, number one, because I've always celebrated. Since it don't have the same sting as someone that went through Jim Crow. I was born just a little bit on the outside of that line. And so by the time I became real conscious of things, I went to a public school with interracial, grew up interracial quite naturally. We dealt with some racism during the time I was in school and different things. And so, but I have celebrated 4th of July with multiracial people, even though I grew up in a black neighborhood, mostly black. To my shock during the pandemic, I went through and counted the households in my neighborhood to find out that my neighborhood is predominantly white, and I thought the whole time we were predominantly black, but inside the neighborhood, the people are very kind once you get to know them. And so I didn't feel all the tinges of it. So if I do the grill, my neighbor, he does the grill. My neighbor, Caucasian, he has cooked and brought me a plate. You know what I mean? I watch, we'd be outside.
That's nice.
Yeah, we kind of have that around that. I haven't seen any racist flares come up, and probably the closest I ever felt like maybe some racism. I seen a neighbor that had a flag of Mark Robertson in his yard. y'all ain't gonna laugh with me, but I laugh at that. And it might not have been a good joke, but that's about the closest I felt like. Wait a minute, where's he coming from? With that. But he's down the road from my neighborhood, down the road from me. But it's just amazing how I'm gonna celebrate. Let me put it that way. But I'm gonna celebrate. I have celebrated Juneteenth. So for Juneteenth, I took a pontoon boat and it was amazing to me, a good mixed race combination up and down the waterway, showing where the Underground Railroad parts of in between Pitt County and Pamlico. And so there was a lady that was teaching it. She was going back and forth showing us how things were, how the slaves escaped, and different things like that. And it was just amazing how sophisticated it was. And, and then also I was able to see where there were free people lived. Now I'm trying to get to my point. So my point is that was amazing, even though I never really knew too much about Juneteenth to about maybe 20 years ago. You know, that wasn't something that was taught in my school. But I'm going to say I'm going to enjoy both. Now, Pastor Lawson, are you going to enjoy? Are you going to do any celebration or anything for July 4th? Or would you? That's the question. Would you?
Yeah, I have in the past, but you know, I don't anymore. I don't cook out on the grill. We never had any family reunions, you know, on July 4th. I think, you know, I think all Black people celebrate the holiday. You know,
Right.
not in its essence, but they celebrate the time off. They travel, they visit family, stuff like that.
I wonder did
but
they?
as far as
Let me throw this out. I wonder did they allow slaves to celebrate July 4th?
well,
I know they didn't. I'm just trying to be specific. Did they get the
first
day
of
off?
all, I think they made it. I think they probably made it plain to them that this is not, you know, for you.
This ain't for you, buddy.
One of the things we probably ought to ask about is, you know, the Black people. You know, Black people fought on both sides in the Revolutionary War.
Mm-hmm.
There were Black people that fought for the British, and there were Black people that fought for the colonies. I wonder if a Black man fought for the colonies in their war for independence, do they automatically become a free man after the war? No.
No, we can't hear you.
No.
Hold on.
That is
you
muted.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
You can hear me now. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm muted. The thing is, I'm gonna just kind of get in because y'all put out a lot of stuff, and I got to catch up. The first thing, Pastor Forbes, that you brought into the deal is the power of images.
Right.
The power of images, and I think a lot of times we miss the power of images. When you talked about the flag and you wearing that and how people see it, well, that's what they. I think they have understood that. I think a lot before we understood how they work it and use it. The power of images. That's what the statues was about. They wanted you to see that image and make you think a certain way. You know, after the war, the daughters of the Confederacy, they were trying to reconstruct history to sanitize it.
Right.
So it's not about slavery. And then see what huh?
You know, they'll say to you, this is not about hate, this is about heritage. The heritage of hate.
Right. They were trying to change the conversation, and they use those images to make you understand that when you walk in that courtroom and you see that image, who you get in your place, understand your place. You know what I'm saying? I'm just saying the use of images. The other thing is, as far as the racism thing, I think that comes under the class thing. That really isn't about so much. The black and white thing was a created thing.
Yes, it was.
It was a created construct where, you know, the wealthy people wanted to make sure they kept theirs, like they still do. And what they do is separate us, and they figured out a way to separate us from the slave. And they had indentured white servants.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't want them two to get together because they were treating them both bad.
Elder, you clearly can see for years when you look historically, Irish people were considered white, Italian people were considered white, Jewish people weren't considered white, and they had to work themselves into a position to be considered white.
They also weren't considered black,
That's true.
which is just as important.
Pastor,
Right. So yeah. So that whole thing was, but the
But God is not a racist. 'Cause,
No, he's not.
back when Moses married the black woman, and Miriam and Aaron were disturbed by it, God punished them for that.
They did. He did.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
The underline is
And his
that
punishment, he made Miriam whiter.
yep, leprosy. Yep.
But you see,
He reminded them, said, "Look, you all are prophets, and or you feel yourselves as prophets, and that you can speak to the people. But here's the thing: I'll show dreams and visions to y'all. But Moses, I talked to him face to face. He had already told him
God
before, but
Almighty.
he reminded him again. So.
That's true. Well, on
Well-
that note, we're coming to another sponsorship break. Y'all keep trying to, he think we're playing double dutch. He trying to jump in. Every time we jump in, get ready to jump in. It's time to go to a break. we'll let Elder lead off in the next one. But on that note, we're going to our next sponsorship break. Call in. Let us know what you're thinking, how you feel about the subject we're talking about. 252-756-2008. That's 252-756-2008. You listen to Real Talk for Real Men on 107.5 FM.
You're listening to Awesome Radio, WECU 107.5 FM, 1570 AM. Christian media with the spirit of excellence.
Kickback Jack's Greenville, 420 Red Banks Road. Opens Sunday through Thursday, 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Friday and Saturday, 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. Kickback Jack's is the greatest sports bar in Greenville with over 40 high-def large-screen televisions to watch your favorite games with family and friends while enjoying our great food. Award-winning wings, juicy, savory burgers, mouth-watering pizzas, made from scratch appetizers, dinners, and desserts, paired with your favorite drink. Did you know? Kickback Jacks has a private meeting space that seats 55 for fellowships like after Sunday church gatherings, retirement parties, wedding receptions, birthday parties, family and child-friendly karaoke, and more. Ask about the enclosed outdoor patio section that seats 30. Add that to the 55. Become a regular at Kickback Jacks Greenville, 420 Red Banks Road, 252-329-0400. That's 252-329-0400. Traveling? Well, visit our other regional locations in Durham, Raleigh, and 2 in Greensboro. Kickback Jacks Greenville, 420 Red Banks Road. Go Pirates.
In America, is an employee dress code covered by the faith? Stay tuned.
Legal perspectives on the tough issues Christians and secular workplaces today are facing. This is the Legal Alert with attorney David Gibbs Jr. of the Christian Law Association.
Michael was a customer service representative, and he wore a pin with a Christian cross to work every day. His supervisor asked him to remove it, citing company dress code policies. Michael complied, but he really questioned because it had been there for so long. He contacted our lawyers at the Christian Law Association, and we demonstrated his right to religious freedom and speech in the workplace. Michael was allowed to continue wearing his pin, expressing his faith at work, and giving his testimony. Once our lawyers explained to the company the rights of freedom of the faith in America, they agreed and permitted Michael to wear his pin.
The legal landscape is certainly changing for Christians, so let the Christian Law Association be your compass and guide. Free legal resources are just a click away at christianlaw.org. For example, you'll find legal brochures, case updates, our e-alert newsletter, and a complete publication catalog, all at christianlaw.org.
You're listening to Awesome Radio, WECU 107.5 FM, 1570 AM. Christian media with the spirit of excellence.
Surely in the family, God is is with me. Surely in the famine, God is with me. Surely in the famine, God is with me.
And we are back. Real Talk for Real Men on Awesome Radio. 107.5 on your FM dial. 1570 on your AM dial. WECU. Thank you for joining in, and we are moving forward in our last segment. We'd like for you to call in if you have an opinion on whether or not African Americans should celebrate the 4th of July, or how should we celebrate the 4th of July given our history in America. Let me make a comment. When I look back on the whole fiasco that went down with Colin Kaepernick kneeling while during the national anthem, he's kneeling, and there've been others that done things other than put their hand over their heart. I had somebody tell me that they were at a football game, and when the national anthem was being sang, because they were sitting down, somebody came about 4 rows up and confronted him. And so I wonder, when people are intimidated, when Caucasian people are intimidated by minorities not honoring the flag the way they think they should, are they intimidated, or do they have a problem with it because it's in their way, it's bothering the way they honor the flag? Or is it because it's bringing up old wounds that they don't want to be brought up?
We would have a conversation. Somebody approached me with that, and I'm a Marine. I serve, so that's not what that whole thing is. I think sports has made, that's part of the problem that sports created, injecting that into the sport. That's just my thought on that. But and when you actually look at it, it wasn't always like that. That's why knowing history is important. You know what I'm saying? Knowing history and how things started and what, put that in. And that's why what you was talking about earlier, Pastor Lawson, you started out talking about the history. And a lot of people, black and white, don't know the history. So they create things, and a lot of things kind of stick, depending on what the ruling class wants to stick. And we get caught up in that. That's why somebody said, I'm trying to think of who said it. And it wasn't a little, it was somebody that said the conquerors write the history. Those who win write the history. Those who are in charge write the history. So that's why when we were growing up, all this stuff we were talking about, that wasn't in the history books. There was probably one little paragraph about Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. That's all we heard about slaves. All we heard about was George Washington and the cherry tree and how honest he was. In the meantime, he owned people, but we didn't hear about that. So now that the history is starting to be exposed, and you can say whatever you want about technology, but that website Google, that's been there's negatives and positives, but I think when it comes to history, it's been a major positive because it puts it in our hands. And the Colin Kaepernick thing and that whole flag thing, I think that's a distraction about it. Most of the time you go to games during the national anthem, people getting hot dogs and all kinds of stuff. Ain't nobody really standing up and saluting and doing that's crazy. Huh?
But you better not kneel. You can get a hot dog, you can be drinking your beer, but If you
But in
never-
the but them same people, they got flags wrapped around their head. They doing all things. Now they turning them upside down. There is a etiquette for flags. There's actually an etiquette. You know what I'm saying?
Now
But go ahead.
That is confusing. Now they can turn a flag upside down, and that's really a protest to me because you don't suppose, technically, like you said, the etiquette is you don't turn the flag upside down. But when they do it, they're a patriot. You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
That's some of the reason why I make sure I put a flag out, and then I would put who I'm voting for out there too, just to kind of mess with folks. I'm still you get what I'm saying? Because they want to make everybody fit a narrative that everybody don't fit.
So, Elvin, your point earlier, are you saying that that maybe the national anthem should have never been a prelude to sports games?
I don't think it always has been.
And you're right, it has not. But somebody made a decision, and once they made that decision, it became, at high school games, college games, professional games, and all sports. And you're saying that had they known their history better, you're saying they might not would have done that?
Well, it's something. It's something that people in the ruling, I hate to say ruling class, in the money class, because they're the ones that really create this stuff. You know what I'm saying? The owners are the ones that barred Colin. I mean, they essentially blacklisted him. You know what I'm saying? And so those are the people with the money. Those are pretty much all the owners are billionaires, especially in football.
It was because of the people that had the money to pay for the tickets.
Yeah, it was a reaction from fans. They were afraid that there were some fans that were threatening that if the NBA,
NFL, NBA,
NBA,
yeah. But you know, NBA,
it was baseball too.
they couldn't do nothing with LeBron when LeBron decided I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that.
But they did. Rauf, what was his name? That he didn't honor the national anthem.
Yeah.
And he was blackballed. And he was one of the best. Somebody thought that he was one of the best NBA players. Rauf.
Yeah,
I forgot what team he
But
played
look
with.
at you struggling to say his name.
You
struggling to say you ought to know right there because of how his name sounded. They won't with it.
That contributed.
Yeah.
Because he had changed
Like
his name.
Elder said, images of power.
Yeah.
I know who you're speaking of, but go ahead. I can't think of his last name off the top.
So they blackballed him. All of a sudden, he was not an NBA player. He couldn't sign with a team no more.
Well, see, but it really comes back to the money. It comes back to the money. Depending on who you are and how much money you bring in makes a difference, whether the owner backs you or not. I don't really think it's the fans. I don't quite go with that.
In that
I
case,
think who brings the money in.
in that case, it was the threat from the fans that caused them to act because they didn't act immediately. It was on the news going back and forth for a long time before any of the NBA or any of the sports teams and sports owners made a decision. There were a few that made a decision immediately, but it went for a long time. And it was
Who are you talking about, though?
threats were building up against the NFL and the NBA. And that's when the commissioners start making rules or giving an opinion on it.
Well, and
Because they were silent for a while and didn't say nothing.
Yeah. And you look at, it's amazing that the NFL fan base and the NBA fan base is a little different. And I think also it depends on what city you're in. But I mean, you can't really say that for Colin because Colin was in San Francisco.
San Francisco.
So I that's more of a liberal area, you know what I mean, than anything. But at the same token, I think that the whole football idea and the basketball is kind of different. But like even with LeBron was kind of walking around. He was saying stuff. People look when he gave to a school, they found fault with that. Whenever he did different little things, they said, "Well, we don't need him commenting. We just need him to dribble the ball.
Yeah, shut up and dribble.
Just shut up and dribble."
But he was bringing in a lot of money too.
Oh yeah.
And that kind of sort of insulated it to the point where they couldn't do but so much because the owner say, "Hey, this guy's bringing a lot of money to the league."
Not just the owner, the whole league.
Right, the league, right.
Yeah. The whole league had to look at it because I think sometimes they pick somebody trying to find who's the next Jordan, and then as that person keep playing, that drives money. Just like even with Caitlin Clark, with her, her coming to the league and Angela Reese coming to the league, it's drawn a whole lot of attention to the WNBA that they wouldn't have had. So
And she's bringing in the money.
Yeah,
whenever she goes to play, they sell out. But
why is she bringing in the money?
Time.
It's not because she's the greatest player that ever came into the WNBA. Let's get it straight.
Yeah, that's true.
She's bringing in the money because she is a white player from Middle America,
hometown girl.
And when Middle America saw her, they said, "There's our great white hope again." If you ever watched that movie, Great White Hope, that of course the sport was boxing then. It kind of sheds a lot of light on what's going on with the whole Caitlin Clark thing.
Yeah, we got to find that they can show that we are superior.
Yeah,
but you can also, that kind of goes with the Larry Bird, Magic Johnson thing too. It kind of parallels that, I think, to a point.
The difference is a big difference is Magic Johnson and Larry Bird were being viewed as competitors, not one greater than the other. This thing with Caitlin Clark is Caitlin Clark alone. Everybody else shut up and stand back.
Well, but they created the thing around Angel Reese too. So her and Angel Reese.
Speak up and say, "Me too." Angel Reese had to force them to bring her into the conversation.
But I'm saying the idea, because when they came into the league together, they increased the league.
Yeah, that's what
and I think that's what she's doing with the WNBA.
That's not what the media is saying.
Well, the media's off the wall half the time. But I'm saying I can be the media too and say, no, I think that it's because it's opinion.
But they're pushing the narrative. Caitlin Clark is not representative of hardly any of the stuff that they're saying. She even said, "I don't like the fact that my name is being used that way." She said,
Right. She wants to play ball.
But the media knows what gets clicks. They know what.
I agree with you.
We're talking about the media, and I know we kind of trailed off our subject. So, what do y'all think about the media coverage of the debate? And then we'll try to.
It's all out of proportion.
Yeah.
It's all out of proportion, and I'm glad. Well, since we went there, I wanted to say one other thing about something that was said earlier, and just make a point if I have the time.
Guess you got time. Go ahead. Get as much time as you want. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say when we were talking about, and you brought up Moses, and we were talking about the black thing, the racial thing.
Oh, Zipporah, I'm sorry.
And the way they created, the Europeans broke up what we call the Middle East. During biblical times, it wasn't like that. And it's good to know that too. People travel.
Yeah.
There was people all over the place. Black people from Northern Africa. Paul was from Tarsus. That's essentially Libya. You know what I'm saying? We got to understand that this thing they created, we fall right into it without doing any in-depth understanding or research as to, wait a minute, this wasn't always like this.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And this little breakup that we have over there is not the way it's always been. But that's another story. What was the point we were talking about just now? The sports thing. I don't know. I just think that it's the way that it's going, and she's Caitlin is she just wants to play ball, man.
Now, when we think about, I guess we'll go back to July 4th. What do you? I'm gonna say what Frederick. I'm gonna quote Frederick Douglass. In his scathing Independence Day speech, Douglass also stated, "The 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn." But he also is famous for saying, "To the black man, what is the 4th? What to the slave is the 4th of July?" He noted that the nation's fathers were great men for just that notion, for the ideals of freedom. But what do y'all say today?
Well, I think my reading of Frederick Douglass' account, I agree with him in the fact that, first of all, you acknowledge that what the founding fathers did for America was a big deal. Okay, there's no need to take anything away from that. It was a big deal. However, at the same time, because of the state of slaves in America, then black people should have the right to say, you know what, while you were free, we were slaves. The freedom that you're celebrating, we were slaves at that same time. And none of that freedom translated over to us. As a matter of fact, your enemy was not our enemy.
And let me answer that too.
And that was a good point. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to bring up, I watched a documentary on what happened to a lot of the slaves that fought on the side with the British. Some of them actually went back to England. Some of them actually returned back to Africa. And then some of the people also went to the British Isles and British territory in Canada. So that was some of the things that happened with those that fought alongside the British. I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, one of the big differences between black people in Britain is that the relationship that Great Britain had with Africa was a lot different from the U.S. because Great Britain actually had partners in Africa. Mm-hmm. So there were a lot of people that were walking the streets of Great Britain that had been black people who had been free for years and centuries and had established themselves and were businessmen, whereas America's relationship with Africa was mostly the slave trade.
Yeah, and let me put this to that. During the trip that we were taking, the lady pointed out that there were some people from the West Coast that worked in the rice fields that they got from Africa that never became slaves and returned back to Africa. But
right,
last word, Taylor.
Yeah, because they knew what to do and how to do it, and those people that fought with the Brit, we fought for ourselves. It wasn't taking sides. It was like for ourselves. You know what I'm saying? So when they went with the British and British promised them freedom, yeah, I'm going with that.
And one of the things I noticed during the presentation, the lady said that there was a slave owner that was black that was in Little Washington, and she explained real well that a lot of times when you had slave owners that were free, they went and got their family. They owned that, so they generally got family to put them on their land, and they didn't treat them as slaves. They might have worked, but they weren't treated like slaves. They were family.
What are you talking about, in Britain or in?
They had a guy in New Bern like that too.
Yeah, in America.
Here's the problem with America. There were a lot of people who were free that were converted to slaves.
Right.
Was
That's,
free, had papers, didn't come here as a slave, but were converted to slaves in the South. That's why a lot of them tried to stay away from the South.
and on that note, you're listening to Real Talk for Real Men on Awesome Radio 107.5 FM. We'll talk to you next week. God bless.
You with me. Yeah.